Resilience profiling is a completely different approach to gathering information from people at local level to that's been used in Views from the Frontline in the past. In that case, the questionnaires were based on an external framework, the HIOGO framework for action on disaster reduction, and on indicators which in turn produced questions which could be quite technical and lengthy because they needed to relate to that external framework. And as we looked at the data, we found that the broad picture we got was incredibly useful, but the detailed responses in many cases seemed to suggest that people were either not finding the questions relevant or didn't have access to the answers to those questions. For example, questions about local government, where people often are quite disconnected from local governance processes and not able to say much other than to express possibly their frustration with them. So the concept of resilience profiling has two key components to it. The first is that it considers all the aspects of people's local experience that affect their progress and their sustainability. That's why we refer to it as resilience profiling rather than risk profiling. The second aspect is that it's based on people talking about their own experience in their own terms. So this makes it very different from the previous surveys we've conducted. So let's take those two aspects and consider how they work. First of all, resilience profiling. The way that we achieve this is by conducting the survey through a simple conversation, and the survey recording document reflects that conversation. It's far simpler than previous surveys were. And the conversation takes 4 steps to it. It starts by asking individuals what they feel are the threats which they're most concerned to take action on or to see action taken on. The threats which have the highest priority for them. These may often be different to those which an external observer would consider most important. In a particular example, in Southeast Asia, communities were asked about the regular flooding they experienced, and they said this isn't a disaster, this is part of the natural cycle here. It maintains the fertility of the fields, we know how to deal with it. So whilst an outside observer might have put down seasonal flooding, the local community didn't. Also, it's not limited to environmental factors, because in practice, when you have these conversations, as I have many times in urban and rural contexts, people talk about the whole basket of factors that affect them, whether they're environmental, such as flooding, economic, such as sudden price hikes or increasing costs of energy, social, violence or even conflict, for example, political decision making which affects their lives. And so the conversation starts by getting people to talk about that and then to agree what they regard as the top 5 priorities in terms of threats. And then for each of those threats we ask 3 further questions. Firstly, what's the impact of that threat on you? How does it affect your life and how does it impede your progress? What can you, your household or your community do? What action can you take? What actions have you taken? This question reveals the local capacities that are in place, sometimes very substantial, to take action to address the threats they face. The final question concerns the barriers that people face. And those barriers will tend to reflect what we call underlying causes, factors which are outside their control. For instance, decision making at national level, economic changes at national level, the many things which they have very little influence over but which influence their lives. These questions taken together, and the words may change to make them appropriate in a local context. We might, for example, talk about consequences rather than impacts. These kind of things need to be locally adapted. But the overall conversation is the same, and it's recorded on a very simple recording sheet in plain language, in the words that people use to express what they have to say. So this is very different to getting them to answer a fixed question and to tick boxes, the kind of things we've done before. And that data can then be analysed through a qualitative analysis process, which is based on identifying responses which are similar and what we call coding those responses, and that enables us to provide quite a powerful analysis. That analysis is done first of all in a very simple way at local level and used to inform community consultations, discussions, collaborations, action planning, implementation and reflection through what we call a kind of action and learning cycle, and this is a subject of a separate video, the process of action and learning. The information's then gathered together to form national reports which present what we call resilience dashboards, showing where there is progress, where there are barriers, where capacities can be built, where particular threats have a high priority. The kind of practical information that can enable decision makers to turn their policies into really effective and strategic implementation. And finally, this data is used at global level, where the data can be presented to show a picture of what's happening nationally, regionally and globally, and by comparing what local people report with the goals and targets of frameworks, including the new Hyogo Framework for Action, the new Sustainable Development Goals and the new Climate Treaty, all being established in 2015. The data can be used to establish baselines, where are we now, and to perform ongoing monitoring to detect whether progress is being made or whether things are going backwards. So it's in reality a very simple concept. We've tested it already quite thoroughly in South America, and learning from that we've adapted it, and we're conducting further testing in Central America with the goal of completing the development of this program, ready to present at the World Conference on DRR in Japan in March 2015. If you'd like any more information or to get involved, then the web address is on the screen now.